No Man's Sky is one of the few games I keep coming back to every year. It's amazing how much it's changed and how many features it keeps on adding after all this time. And I know for many it's hard to keep up with all of the new stuff that's getting added. So I figured we haven't done this in a while. Your support on the last series was of course just insane. So today, ladies and gents, we're starting a brand new, updated, perfect start guide for No Man's Sky for this year and beyond. After we're done with this, you'll learn how to become super efficient with everything, get all the money and resources from early to end game, and set yourself up with all of these flashy new rewards you see everybody rocking these days. Now for this, I started a brand new save file just to make things easier. And early tutorial phase, you're kinda left off stranded with not much going on, so your only choice is to grab what you can and head for your ship. To that end, I'm going to immediately grab some of the starting resources, including dihydrogen, carbon, and ferrite dust. This will be enough to power up my ship and also craft some of the early on stuff that we need. And then some extra sodium and oxygen when we get the chance, which is going to be needed to recharge our shields and life support. We're actually going to be doing that quite a lot in the early to mid game. And by the way, here are a few tips to make this a lot more efficient. First of all, use the multi-tool overheat mechanic to double the speed at which you mine resources. So simply do like how I do, simply hover between 90 to 95% or just as the beam turns to red, and then give it that split second pause before resuming mining, as this is going to let you grab a lot more resources. And it's going to help a ton until we get better upgrades. But don't worry, early game is literally the only time and place we'll get to be doing this much manual labor. Later on, we'll simply be too rich to care about this any longer. Second of all, look out for these fragments that you can get from mining the dihydrogen I mentioned previously. Like you just saw me, we were lucky enough and just got one of these storm crystals out of it. And these sell for over 200,000 units a piece, which is incredibly useful at this stage until we of course find the proper planet to farm this more consistently. And third of all, once you have enough to craft your analysis visor, I also suggest scanning the resources that you mine, especially ones that indicate the question marks below the main resource. This way you can gain a secondary resource from the same plant or rock. Like for example, in this case, I'm able to get extra oxygen while farming for carbon, or sodium while also going for ferrite dust. But we're kinda done with this, so I'm just going to head over to our ship. Of course, I'm going to grab any additional resource I can on the way. But this is also the perfect time to explain to you the melee jump boost. And if you're a veteran of the game, you can just skip over this step. For all the newcomers, this is basically this jump animation that you see me doing all the time that lets me cover a lot more ground much faster. So this is done by pressing the melee attack button while sprinting with my character, which then I can combine with a jet boost to give me a lot more momentum and boost much further away. So on the PC, that's done by holding shift to sprint with the character, then pressing Q to do a melee hit, and immediately after following up with a spacebar press, which lets me do this animation, gain a lot more momentum, and just lets me cover a lot more ground very fast. Also, pay attention to how I'm dozing off the jet instead of consuming the entire tank right away. This lets me cover way more ground, especially when coming off cliffs and other high up places, and even prevents fall damage as you still keep some reserves in that tank. You can think of this as kind of like playing Flappy Birds, and you're going to be doing this even in the end game with a full on leveled character, as you're going to just make jetpacking around way more efficient. And speaking of that, another quick tip over here is to use some of these blue deuterium plants, which can further buff up the jetpack boost so you don't consume any fuel for the next 5 to 10 seconds. So actually very useful to just reach any point you want. In any case, we're about to hit our ship. There's also going to be a bit of oxygen in front of it, so it's always nice to collect some extra of it. But we're gonna go inside to create a save point and progress with the story. Now, our ship is one of the primary ways to make manual save points whenever we enter and then exit it. And in the past couple of years, the game now also added autosaves even outside of the main ship. So you're not going to be in as much of a risk anymore to lose progress if you venture too far away from it and not have saved for like the past maybe few hours. Anyway, the next phase kind of teaches us about refining materials, which is why we're going to talk a bit about the portable refiner. Another tip for efficiency over here is to get a ton of ferrite dust by simply grabbing some of this rusted metal. You will find a ton of it actually, especially when interacting with some of these containers, especially the large green ones. So don't throw these away, keep them up. They actually refine in a 1:2 ratio in ferrite dust. So 50 metal can actually refine into 100 ferrite dust, which quickly adds up. And then you can place it in the refiner to process this once again, this time around into the pure ferrite that we need for our launch thrusters. So while all of that is processing, I'm going to also start the LS Path storyline by interacting with this red orb nearby. You don't need to, but this is going to set all of that up. In the meantime, I will also grab the damaged machinery nearby. While not the most optimal, they do have a chance to provide extra upgrade modules, including for example this max rank one that I got a bit later, so we can actually either use this to upgrade our character, or in this case our jetpacks, or we can sell this at a space station NPC in exchange for some nanites and then buy something else with them. In the meantime, seeing how we're almost done with this, the only other item we need is the hermetic seal, and luckily the game guides us through the process of getting the first one. And this is also when the game introduces you to another interesting mechanic. However, it only does so partially, so I will fully explain it to you. And this has to do with the weather buffs. So during this moment, the game spawns your very first extreme storm, and this is going to largely depend on the planet that you're on. So for example, in my case, I was on an overheated planet, so this spawned a superheated storm. And the buff that I got from this was that it overcharged my jetpack efficiency, so I could boost for a lot longer than normal. Don't ask how that makes sense, but it's pretty much the equivalent of having like one max rank upgrade, if not even more, so that's quite a big boost. But like I said, other planets with different extreme weathers will provide different effects. So for example, blizzards will cool your mining beam, which lets you mine for a lot longer. On the other side, toxic storms let you sprint further, probably because you're going to want to outrun imminent death. And finally, radioactive storms let you mine additional resources, so that can be a good way to mine for extra stuff when you need it. That's why you don't want to hide from these storms and instead use them to your advantage. You should have plenty of sodium anyway laying around to quickly regenerate your shields anyway. Otherwise, if you are low and don't have any other way to regen, you can just hide inside any structure or underground caves, even the ones created by you with the terrain manipulator. But now it should be all done and ready for liftoff, so we're gonna go ahead and head over into space for the first time. Now, one quick tip that I have for you before doing anything else, since you're going to need quite a bit of money for the missions ahead, is you can actually get some more by just farming some of these asteroid fields nearby. Now, generally they are filled with gold and silver, sometimes also platinum, besides the usual tritium that you need anyway to power up your pulse engines. So look for the less generic, usually more intricate looking asteroids, which usually contain some of these more rare resources. You can also get condensed variants of them, by the way, so pay attention to any nuggets and hyperclusters you might get, which can give you even bigger yields. So aim to make around 100k if you can before doing anything else from this point on. Alternatively, you can also farm cobalt from underground mines if you happen to find them upon planets, but for now this is just as good, if not maybe even better. Here is also where I kinda handle my Quickbinds this or before actually doing the takeoff. Quick menu is an easy way to actually reach actions very fast, but you can actually do it much faster if you're on keyboard and mouse. For example, I like to bind the third person camera switch on number 3 on my keyboard and mouse, so I can switch between the third and the first person perspective both on the ship and on foot. You can actually designate the same button for both. Also, photo mode, I usually set it on number 4 to quickly access that, but you can also put pretty much anything else, like switching between multi-tools, summoning things such as, for example, creatures or even your ships, and many of the other things that you have right here from the quick menu. You can bind them very easily, so definitely go ahead and do it. Now, this should be done with the tutorial part of the game, and as you're not quite there to become a true space adventurer just yet, we're going to focus the next steps on some of the early on missions, beginning with the base computer missions and some of the Artemis quest line, as that's going to give you some of the starting things, at least until we get the first base and our starting teleporter. So what I like doing before that is to usually scout for potential paradise planets, just scanning all of them in my starting system. Usually there's a decent chance for your starting system to have one, and you can definitely set up a base over there. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case here, so what I did is I got lucky and randomly stumbled upon a miner settlement on one of the starting planets. And settlements, by the way, come with launch pads, so this is going to save a ton of our launch fuel costs early on, as both landing and taking off from them does not consume anything. Plus, you also get access to a trading terminal inside that sells goods and buys goods, and also some unique items that can actually help with some later on quests. But at this stage, you will need some copper for your starting base computer. So a quick tip over here, you can actually dismantle the rocket launcher of your starting ship and get 100 copper that you can then turn into chromatic metal. So again, I'm going to use the personal refiner to turn some of that into chromatic metal that we need for our initial base computer. If you don't want to do that and sacrifice it, the game already teaches you how to craft the terrain manipulator, which you can then use to manually mine for these deposits anyway. In this case, that would be copper. So one major mistake to avoid here when collecting them this way is to use the terrain beam on the minimal possible size, as that lets you maximize the yield. Going with the maximum size instead just depletes it way too fast and gives you the minimal amount of resources out of it, so it's definitely not worth it. Now, as far as our early on structure, don't overcomplicate things. A simple 4x4 house is going to be all that you need at this stage, and we're just going to follow the questline from here until we get to build the construction research unit, which will also open up and unlock some of the other base tech that we need, but of course we will need salvage data for that. So what I'm going to do for now is to go ahead and scout some of that salvage data by taking a look at some of these buried technology modules that you can see all over the scanners. So we're going to use the terrain manipulator to unearth them and grab them. Pretty much every container drops between 1 to 4 salvage data, so you don't really need that many for the early on unlocks. However, since they sell for quite a lot, I typically like using this as a decent early on money method. About 30 minutes of doing this should yield about a 1 million units profit, plus affording everything that I need at this point. And by the way, if you do this farm on moons instead of planets, moons actually have buried technologies oftentimes slightly closer to one another, so you can potentially farm a bit more compared to the more larger planets. But we're kind of done with that. It's time to head over to our base, and in this case, like I said, don't overspend. The only thing that you should buy with the salvage data for now is the starting teleporter and the biofuel reactor. All of the remaining ones, especially batteries and solar panels, you can actually get them for absolutely free by simply completing some of the very early overseer missions that you get for the base NPCs right after this. So it's your choice. This is how I like to do it. So for now, these should suffice. On the plus side, also the biofuel reactor is more efficient than ever. So even like a dozen or so of this carbon will keep it active for like 22 real world hours. So that is an insane amount for just the small amount of resources that we're spending. So I'm just going to go ahead and place all of these down. And by the way, quick tip, you can actually stay inside of the structure that you build if you want to stay away from any environmental damage by simply entering the free camera mode. On the PC, that's going to be by pressing the B button or the equivalent on your controller, which is going to let you lift off, but your character is still going to be in the same place. It's only that the camera that moves. It helps a ton with positioning, not just to avoid damage from the environment. With this out of the way, we kind of have a few options. We can of course go for the base NPC missions and recruit the overseer, the scientist, and so on. Eventually, this is something that I'm going to be doing, and I suggest you guys doing too, as they will unlock some of the rewards that you normally need to spend a ton of nanites or salvage data at the space anomaly to get anyway. So you will get a lot of the high-end crafting components, exocrafts, even some of their upgrades, free multi-tools, and the missions are typically quite easy to complete. And quick tip over here, stock up on some microprocessors and especially Pugnium. If you happen to stumble upon them, they are needed for some of the early on scientific missions. For now though, what I'm going to do is to sell some of the items we just talked about for some nice profit. So the storm crystal that fetches 200k, also some of the gold, silver, and some of the platinum, another 100, and then the salvage data that I had left, which is like 1 million units in total. Plenty enough for the early stages. And from this point on, we'll hardly do any more mining. It's only going to be done for some of the ultra rare resources. Everything else we're going to buy from space stations and other trading terminals. So it's nice because the story also progressed and brought us to our very first space station visit, and it's also a magnificent looking one ever since the previous update. But this is also when we get to interact with the space station teleporter, and this is going to give us a lot of options. One of which is that it just catalogs all of the locations and space stations we visited before, so we can actually use this as a trading route later on, as I'm going to show you, to make a ton of money and a ton of nanites. Until that happens, we're gonna need to unlock intergalactic travel. So again, the main quest will lead us to our very first hyperdrive blueprint and some of the initial antimatter. And this leads us to the very first crash freighter, so after you grab the hyperdrive from it, go ahead and install it. Technically, you can bypass this by claiming the Omega ship or just claiming any of the ships from previous expeditions, but if you're a complete new player on a complete new account, that's not going to be accessible to you, so I will guide you through the complete beginner process. So before you head over in space or anywhere else, make sure that you don't skip the extra cargo buried around the crash site. So you're going to need a scanner for this to see where they are, but they are good because they can actually provide extra antimatter, which you can then use to power up that hyperdrive. If you don't get any somehow, you can simply just follow the rest of the mission, which is going to bring you these coordinates to a nearby facility where you can learn that recipe anyway for the antimatter. So grab the formula, and before you're ready to go, there's one more thing you should be doing, and that is to pay attention to the abandoned facility you've just been into, because this is a great opportunity to make some of the early on nanites by stealing some of the alien eggs laying around. Do not worry, this is just for this stage. There's going to be a much better farm for nanites coming up in just a bit. As you may or may not know, the second you attack these eggs, it's going to spawn a swarm of horrors, and they can definitely mess you up. So the safest route is to just dig the old tunnel under the egg, as we used to back in the old days, which is going to safely let you roll the eggs down towards you. I recommend, by the way, marking the eggs first and then doing any underground digging, as this is going to let you better position yourself and see everything from below, which is going to become quite annoying once you do get there. In total, I got about 13 or so eggs from this method, just from one facility, so that's a nice 800 or so nanites, plus some of the extra we get from the missions. We can practically afford at least 1 or 2 max rank upgrades right away. Now that all of this is done, we're ready for our first intergalactic travel. You should be capable of warping to different systems and eventually even lead towards a space anomaly. But on the way there, I managed to stumble upon a radioactive world that also listed activated resources, in this case activated copper, and planets with such resources have a good chance for extreme weathers, which in turn means storm crystal farming, you know, the one that previously gave us 200,000 units per one piece. So since we're here, might as well turn this into a farming method and get a few extra million on our way towards the next destination, because once the extreme weather kicks in, you'll see all of these crystals activating at a time, and this lets you finally collect them. So this planet is actually insanely good. The storm lasts very long, so this gives me the opportunity to collect many of these storm crystals. In the end, I was able to grab like a few dozen, amounting to around 7 million units or equivalent, which is actually really nice. So if you stumble upon a similar planet, go ahead and mark it down with a base computer or just rename it so that you know where it is situated and get to visit it later on. Now, by our first visit to the space anomaly, we got plenty of resources to afford a few upgrades. So some of the ones I recommend to grab immediately are the hazmat gauntlets. This is going to let you collect some of the high-end resources that you will need, like selenium and so on. So definitely go ahead and get them. And also grab the personal refiner. There's even an MK2 version nowadays that lets you do combinations and refining on the go. This lets you actually do it anywhere you want, just from your inventory, even including space stations and other restricted areas like the inside of your ship. And also check out the exosuit expansion slots. You might need some of them. You can actually get 2 per system, 1 from the anomaly and 1 from the space station, and you can actually get a ton of them very easy with the initial money. And focus on these early on, as you will do a lot of resource collecting, so juggling inventory is going to be important. Others I recommend getting are the hyperdrive upgrades, at the very least to get in some of the other solar systems like the green, red, and blue ones, and also maybe consider at least the economy or the conflict scanner early, maybe even both. This is going to be used for a very easy money and nanite farming method in just a bit. Now, before we move on further, I wanted to cover one more great thing Hello Games added in some of the recent patches, which is the Expedition Terminal. And this is where you can now take part in all the newest expeditions from now on without having to actually completely restart every time and create new save files. You can actually do it right here with your current save file and even transfer your character, its progression, even your own ship. And as you can see, many slots for extra resources, like giving in extra modules to have on the other side. And the best thing is that at any point during or after you're done with the expedition, you can actually switch back to your normal save and even transfer back some of the progress you made during that expedition. Like I said many times before, expeditions are a great source to get way more upgrade modules way faster and for free. And another great thing is that once you're done with the expedition and get all the account-wide rewards, you also get a final score. And depending on that score, you're going to get a number of nanites, units, and most important, a lot more quicksilver. Actually, a lot more than you get from the weekly missions you usually get. So always when there's an expedition available, try to do these and try to focus on them for now, because you can always come back to your existing save file and resume progression from that point on. Now, personally, I've taken part in all the expeditions that have ever been released, so I pretty much have all the account-wide upgrades. That's why I'm going to also unlock a bunch of them, and in this case, also one of these awesome recent ships, and you can of course now use them and unlock them for 1400 nanites. It used to be free, but that was slightly unbalanced, so HG made it a bit more fair and added this low cost to it early on. But from this point on, my next suggestion is to focus on the Artemis and Atlas Path quest lines, and I'm going to show you a way to complete them both at the same time, because if you do so, you can actually get both the rewards, which are kinda intertwined, and some of them depend on the rewards from the other quest line. So quick story spoilers ahead for anybody who hasn't completed for some reason the main story in the past 7 years. You can skip over this part and go to the next one. For everybody else, here's what you're going to want to do. If you follow this guide up until now, you likely follow the Awakenings quest line, which eventually led to meeting Artemis and Apollo and all the other characters, and you're going to want to actually follow that up until the Purge mission, right here until you hit this screen with these 3 choices. This includes seeking the final interface, completing the Atlas Path, and exploring the galaxy. So here's a quick breakdown of these individual choices. If you pick the first one to seek the final interface, this is just the natural progression that will bring you further in the Artemis quest line, eventually leading to those 16 warp jumps between systems towards the galactic core. This will eventually reach its conclusion with a final big decision. However, this will also make you miss out on the rewards from the Atlas Path, which you will now have to restart from the beginning. So instead, I suggest going with the second option to complete the Atlas Path, which instead switches to that storyline and lets you progress in both of these quests from here on out at the same time. So from this point on, you will have to teleport to 10 Atlas stations, craft these reality seeds that you get from them, and present them to the next interface up until the final 11th one. And there are a few things that you're going to achieve along the way, as you're pretty much completing both that Purge mission as well as this, if you picked the second option as I told you. So on one side, every single warp towards the next Atlas interface also counts towards those 16 warp jumps in the Purge mission for Artemis questline. So this is going to mean you're going to do at least 11 out of the 16 jumps if you completely go for the Atlas path during that moment. Basically, every new Atlas interface jump is going to give you another portal glyph and count for another one of those jumps in the Purge mission. Second of all, since Atlas stations naturally provide many warp cells, about like 8 in total at the very least, you will literally power up almost all of the space travel that you need for both mission objectives at the same time without consuming any additional resources. And third of all, you can also learn lots of Atlas words from the stations that you visit. On the later stages, about 10 to 15 per station, which will help a ton if you need the 50 milestones for the final Atlas interface. So if you do this right, by the time you head over to the final Atlas interface, that should be at least 11 out of the 16 jumps and glyphs from the Purge mission. And by this point, you have crafted the Heart of the Sun needed to finish off the Atlas path, and I suggest picking off the Birth a New Star option. This is going to give you an achievement, doesn't have any downsides, also unlocks the ability to see black holes at any time, and also gives you the Star Seed Blueprint, one of the only 2 upgrades in the game that provides extra core health for your character. And by the way, that Heart of the Sun you unlocked from the Atlas path is also used in a recipe for a different item for extra core health in that Awakening/Purge mission. Keep in mind that seeds leading to the Heart of the Sun will need cadmium, emerald, and indium on top of some of the other resources, but these ones are a bit more, well, exclusive, and you're going to find them by also going to red, green, and blue systems. So that's why I suggested earlier to get the Hyperdrive upgrades. So once you're done with all of this, technically you can still follow some extra objective for the Atlas path, which is going to let you get extra nanites or get to learn more words in exchange for providing curiosities like creatures and, well, worlds that you've discovered. But practically that just goes on infinitely, so you don't have to repeat it if you don't want to. But from this point on, you're done with that, so you can now resume the Purge mission and go to the final portal. In my case, I literally finished the Atlas path on the 15 out of 16 jump for the Purge mission, so after doing one more, I got the final glyph and went ahead and activated the final portal. And quick tip over here before you jump in, do a hard save and also make sure you switch out to a different ship and multi-tool that you normally don't use, because once you pass through that portal, they will kind of get destroyed on the other side and you will need to repair them, so you don't really want to waste time repairing a lot of slots. But once you follow through that, once on the other side, you're going to eventually reach the final Atlas interface, and given the option between resetting the simulation or refusing the Atlas, there's absolutely no reason to choose anything but reset simulation. You don't have to worry about any progress loss or losing any of your bases. All of that will still exist. You only get the ability to jump to a new galaxy. So there are 4 choices to pick here, each providing different types of planetary spawns. So for example, if you go in the red galaxy called Relentless, this will eventually bring you to Calypso. This is a harsh galaxy, so you will encounter a lot more planets with extreme environments, but also access to more activated resources. So there's a trade-off in earning a lot more resources, but at the cost of your survival. Second one is Inspiring. This is going to be the Lush Galaxy, which brings you to Azentem. It's quite the opposite of Calypso, as in you're going to encounter way more paradise planets and non-extreme weathers. So this is where typically most players go on their first jump. Then there's Ancestral. This is called the Empty Galaxy. It seems to have more storms. However, I haven't actually been here before. And finally, there's the Improved Galaxy, which seems to be around the same as your starting Euclid. But that is pretty much it. So I chose the green one, as most people did. There's a big community over there, so I went ahead, but Calypso can be just as good for the extra resources. Once done, you also get the final recipe, which is going to be that Remembrance upgrade. And just like in the case of that Star Seed from the Atlas path, this also gives you 1 extra core health to your character. But like I said, you will need Heart of the Sun to complete it, and that one you also get from the Atlas path. So the good thing about doing this slightly longer route is that you get both of these at the same time. And guess what? They also get an adjacency bonus when placed one next to the other. So this is going to mean you're going to get a 3rd extra health core with 3 of them in total for your character. That's actually quite a nice extra bit of HP, which is going to make you survive a lot longer. And once you're in the new galaxy, I suggest to immediately place down a base on any planet you want to. Usually, if it's Azentem, it should be a really nice, lush-looking planet, because this is going to then give you the option for intergalactic travel. So now you can freely go to any teleporter at any space station or your own current base, and this is going to now let you travel between any of your existing past and current bases. And you can actually see what galaxy they belong to, so you can easily jump between Euclid and Azentem or any other galaxy at any point by just doing this progression, especially since a lot of coordinates for very interesting stuff posted by the community is in both of these galaxies. You can of course also take taxis later on, but for now this is going to be your best possible outcome. Now, I do have some extra tips to make some of these missions and many more a lot faster. So let's talk about the first one. At various times, you will need to talk to various NPCs during main story moments, but they themselves will actually require you to increase your standing with them by completing missions, which usually takes a lot longer than you want to. So instead of doing those, you can simply raise that reputation by gifting them their specific faction trinkets. So for example, for Viking, that's going to be Viking daggers. If you go for Korvax, it can be Korvax casings, or even Gek relics for Geks. And by the way, you can buy a ton of these at spaceports, which you can, by the way, easily discover by just scanning with your, well, economy scanner whenever you're in one of their respective systems. So you can just buy them from those NPCs, give them in, and immediately progress through that mission without wasting hours doing other missions. Another one is that at some story objectives will bring you to deep underwater points of interest, and unfortunately the nearest landing zones might be miles away, which means you're gonna waste a ton of time swimming. So a quick tip over here to not waste that time on especially the return back is to use your terrain manipulator and make landing platforms big enough to just get your ship summoned manually. So you can either use existing terrain or just start from the bottom of the sea, build upwards, and then build a quick platform at the top. Once you have plenty enough space, you can easily call in your ship and just head over from over there. You can of course fill gaps with the terrain builder, and I suggest using the square terrain tool and then flatten that up nicely to get the ship in. Third of all, don't forget you can reset missions if you ventured too far away, especially if you jumped through black holes and whatnot. So in this case, that objective can be reset to get close to nearby structures. For example, I had to search for an NPC in a Gek system that was on the other side of the galaxy when I took that mission. So what I did was to reset the mission in a different current Gek system I was in, which continued from here on out and let me speak to a similar NPC right in front of me. This can even be used strategically if you already are in a system that meets those requirements and you don't want to waste any time fast traveling anymore. Simply reset that mission if you're far away enough and just have that spawn in front of you, at least in terms of the objective. By now, we pretty much achieved everything we wanted. We became intergalactic travelers, we learned about the secrets of the universe, and we also want to do one more final thing, which is to conquer the universe. However, for that, we're gonna need money, lots and lots of money. Fortunately enough, there's a very easy and fast method that ensures at least 100 to 150 million units every single hour, maybe even faster than that. And this is going to involve finding and salvaging interceptor ships on dissonant planets. This isn't just a great way to farm between 20 to 50 million units per interceptor depending on the class every like 10 to 15 minutes, but also give tons of extra cargo slots for your primary ship inventory. So simply start the farm by looking out for systems that feature dissonance next to their name. They should look something like this. Oh, and by the way, also try to get a safe beacon with you. We're gonna need that for one of the camps we're gonna find. Once inside such a system, you're going to find at least one of these dissonant planets. They look something like this when opening up your scanners. So head over there and look out for resonators. They kind of look like some of these mining constructs, usually surrounded by nearby enemies. However, you're going to largely ignore them and instead simply shoot the resonator down ASAP and try to get an echolocator from them. Now, typically they actually drop inverted mirrors, but there's a 1 in 5 chance for them to drop echolocators. So once you do have one, you're pretty much all set. And by the way, ignore enemies. It takes like 10 seconds to escape them and disengage. So don't engage in any combat. You don't need anything from them. From here on out, use that echolocator to find the coordinates to a harmonic camp. And this is the place we're actually going to need to basically direct us to nearby crashed interceptors. So what I suggest doing right away is place down that safe beacon and activate this so that you know your way back to this point, as we're going to constantly come back to it once you're done with the interceptors. You're going to, of course, have to also solve a puzzle over here. So do that. It's very simple. And once you're done with that, simply activate this option right here to scan for resonance spikes. You can technically also unlock the multi-tool nearby. It's absolutely free. And you can also have a chance to get a max rank, but you have to be lucky for that. But we found an interceptor ship nearby, so I'm going to head over there, and what I'm going to do is to interact with it and extract all of these items from it, as we're going to need them. So this is going to then give us the option to repair the ship, for which we need only 3 items. So one of them is going to be Radiant Shard. We're going to need 3 of them, and luckily Dissonant Planets hold a ton of these all over the place. So simply mine them on the way and get at least 3 of them per ship. Another one is Inverted Mirrors, which, as I said, we got from those resonators, so you should have plenty of these by this time anyway. The only other thing we need is to turn the brain that we just got from the interceptor into a harmonic brain by presenting this to a nearby structure. So simply activate that brain from your inventory. This is going to reveal a nearby structure where you can go ahead, present it, and this is going to in turn turn it into a harmonic brain, which we can then bring back to the interceptor to fully fix it up, and we're pretty much done with the farm. And from this point on, you will want to return back to the camp that you just marked with the safe beacon. Go ahead and again scan for one of these resonance spikes, which is going to usually bring you to a different crashed interceptor, for which you're going to again repeat the same process again and again. You can actually do this 5, 6, 7, even like 9, 10 times, depending on your luck, from a single camp to find all of these interceptors on that planet. Now, in total, I got only about 6 of them because I wanted to rush this out of the gate, but it took me like 45 minutes to get them. So in this case, most of them were C-class, and I also got a couple of Bs. So when going at a space station to salvage them, the C-class ones gave me between 18 to 24 million units in terms of sellable items. Meanwhile, the B-class provided around 34 million, with the max ranks going up to like a maximum of 50 if you're lucky to get them. So as you can see, it's very lucrative, and we made around 130 million units with the absolute bare minimum setup. You can actually make this way faster if you're more efficient at traveling and finding these resources. And best part about this, as you can see, we got quite a few of these extra cargo upgrades I can apply to my ship. At high enough levels, every single inventory upgrade can cost up to like hundreds of million units per one individual slot, so this will save you so much money you wouldn't even believe it. Now, there are a couple of tips I have here to make this even more efficient, and the first one is you can actually get rid of all of the sentinels that protect the echo resonators, and this is going to make it a lot easier for you to farm some of those echo locators. So in this case, you're going to want to find sentinel pillars, either by reaching 5 stars wanted level and defeating all of the sentinels and then reaching 1, or by finding a sentinel boundary map. And either of these will bring you to a sentinel pillar, which you can then use to deactivate all sentinel forces within that solar system. And I really mean it, every single sentinel force will get instantly deleted, which, by the way, can also be a very good way to farm extra milestones, because you're going to see those numbers popping up as if you just destroyed every sentinel within the same system. And the second tip is that you can also destroy the mining resonators by simply shooting from your ship. You never have to actually leave it from this point on, and also you don't have to worry if you already took down the sentinel forces. There's not gonna be any additional interceptor ships spawning to attack you when you do this. So actually this will make the farm a lot better. But once we got all of this money, you can also do this on the side every now and then. We can then funnel some of those millions into nanites. Specifically, about 5 million units and 15 minutes of farm can give us like 50,000 nanites at the very least. Again, this can be made a lot more efficient. So for this, you're going to have a conflict scanner installed. Luckily, it's inexpensive, and then you're going to want to filter by conflict level in the galaxy view. And from this point on, simply look over for the red systems until you find one that has a skull next to it and mentions pirate control. This is the one you're going to want to be in. Once in one, you're going to want to head over to the black market merchant on the nearby space station, and specifically only buy the suspicious packet arms and suspicious packet tech. Ignore the rest, you don't really need it unless you really want to combine this with a money farming method. You can instead just buy the Hadal and the larval cores, which can further break down into even more nanites. And you can get up to like 7, 8, even 9 of them if you're lucky from the vendor. But once you get the packets in your inventory, open them up and they will give you these banned technology modules. And now we can just take these at the nearby NPC inside of the same space station and just sell them. It's going to be anywhere between 3,000 to 5,000 nanites just for these, depending on your luck. Plus the extra cores can raise that all the way to like 6,000 nanites. So this is what I'm going to do for now. And this is, by the way, per system. And from this point on, you're going to want to repeat the same process 4 or 5 more times. Again, transporting yourself to different pirate systems over and over again. And again, repeating the same process over there, buying these items, selling the modules, and also getting some of these Hadal and larval cores. Once you get enough of them, you can actually salvage them for quite some nice extra few thousand nanites. And best part is that by the time I'm done with the 5th or 6th pirate system, I can literally travel back to the first system I've ever been into at the same vendor, which is now going to fully have its stock replenished. So what I recommend once you got 5 or 6 pirate systems in your list is to go ahead and rename them and give them a number from 1 to 6. This way you can more easily keep track of them and properly cycle from the first to the last infinitely and buy all of these resources up. This way, it's way more efficient, but you can still use the teleporter from the pirate control system since it only lets you teleport to other pirate systems. But this way, the way I did it is a lot more efficient. So here's how the yield looks like after doing another turn of the 6 or 7 systems we just visited. So as you can see, there's lots and lots of these modules that we can now sell. So in total, we exceeded about 40,000 nanites just within these systems that were just a few minutes apart. And I can literally do this on repeat from this point on up to infinity, or at least until Hello Games nerfs this. But it's one of the best ways to convert some of the additional units you have into extra nanites so that you can buy any upgrade you want. But now that you're locked and loaded, it's time for some big boy stuff. So let's go over some of the most desirable toys that you can afford at this stage. Actually, some of them are going to come for absolutely free. But in the meantime, you're going to need some extra firepower. So for the next 10 to 20 minutes, just visit different space stations and buy up all the max rank upgrades that you need, especially for your ship firepower, but also for your character, like movement, HP, and so on. So your two best options for the ship are either Infra Knife or Cyclotron Ballista. Now personally, I prefer the Infra Knife because it's just much more insane. It deals lots more damage. It also unleashes an absolute barrage of plasma bullets. However, it does take a bit more setup and you will need slightly more components to truly make it shine. But in the meantime, you can totally make do with the Cyclotron modules. You only need like 3 of these max rank ones, easily slap them over the normal one, and then you're gonna have enough damage to deal with some of the stuff that we're going to farm ahead, especially if you're searching for dreadnoughts. But in the end, it's a matter of choice. You can just make do with both of them. They are both going to be absolutely amazing. And this is also the perfect time to talk about upgrade bonuses, also known as adjacency bonuses, but there's also the Supercharge mechanic that was added a couple of years back that we also have to talk about. So you might have noticed that whenever you place down tech upgrades of the same category next to one another, their borders get a shinier outline. That's the adjacency bonus, and it's not just visual, it also slightly boosts the stats of the involved tech upgrade. So the more you actually stack close to one another, the bigger that boost is going to be between them. And the general rule you need to follow is that the more technology modules touch each other, the more they all benefit from the extra bonuses. That is why on one side, setting technologies in a square format rather than a pure line yields much better bonuses. It's because each tech gets to touch at least 2 more other tech modules in the grid. Second rule is that you'll want your best modules to be the one directly touching your primary technology, which means the weakest will always be on the outskirts. So it means it should look something like this. Again, it's going to be dependent on the inventory slots available. It's also going to kind of throw a wrench in your system once we get the supercharged cells. But in the meantime, this is the typical formation you will need. So following the rules above, in this example, we have the Hyperdrive. As you can see, the numbers changing in real time. We're gonna have our main technology first, and then 2 of the most powerful modules in direct contact with it, one on the side and the other one beneath it. It doesn't matter which orientation you pick, either left or right for the one on the side, just make sure that the ones that touch the primary technology also have the best and most desirable available stats. So don't just look at their class, look at the actual percentage stat increases and what they change. Some of them might be more important than others depending on what you want. And finally, we're gonna take the weakest of all, which is typically the upgrade blueprint. We're gonna go ahead and place this on the outskirts. But there's one more thing to take into account, and that's the supercharged cells. You can see them by their distinctive purple overlays. They are somewhat randomized, as in different categories of ships, multi-tool types and freighters can have them in different locations. Also, the rank of these influence how many of these slots you get. So a max rank, for example, multi-tool will get 4 supercharged cells, except your exosuit, which only has 3, and it's always going to be in the same position for everybody. The rest are going to be somewhat randomized. So don't concern yourself too much with its positioning. Typically you can't control it, and instead just look to upgrade your most desirable tech, because each of these supercharged cells gives you a 25% boost to all of the stats of the technology you place inside of it. So that is why for most of the technologies, you'll also want for your best upgrade modules, as in the procedural ones you buy from space stations, for example, to be placed here, because for the majority of them, they give you the biggest percentage bonus increases, so supercharging them only boosts them even further. Now, I'm saying most because there are some exceptions, and some of the base tech, sometimes even the technology upgrades, might have a more desirable stats or internal change. So to give you an example, ship weapon modules benefit a lot more and will gain much higher bonus damage if overcharged compared to their upgrade modules. So to give you a practical example, I have the infra knife right here, which is sitting at around 27 to 28k with our normal grid layout. However, when I supercharged the main infra knife technology, that made it jump to over 45,000 damage, compared to just 36 if I were to use one of its upgrade modules in its place. Other exceptions might include technology upgrades, such as, for example, in the case of the Pulse engine, Sublight Amplifier comes with a drive power of 30%. However, when you put this in a grid, then also make it supercharged, it can reach like 63% like the one in my case. So that can severely reduce the time needed to pulse around, like for example to your next planet or destination. It might be a lot more important to play something like this compared to an upgrade module or technology for your Pulse engine. Again, you're going to want to play around with these for the best outcome, and I also suggest checking out Zane's channel. He actually covered a more extensive video on this before, and it contains so much information, including breakdown for each specific type of technology that you will want, including the type of tech to focus on when you place them in the supercharged cells. Now, while we're on the subject, one of the things I wanted to cover was the X rank upgrades. Added around 2022, they are somewhat of a gamble in terms of the stats that they can give, meaning they can range anywhere from really poor dumpster fire trash to absolute godlike better than anything else in the game. So huge emphasis on gamble, as you're likely going to sink hundreds of thousands of nanites before you can actually get a full inventory of, say, really great maxed out X ranks. However, that should not deter you from at least trying with specific types you might really want, maybe a couple of them, let's say for example in terms of defense. So here's what I recommend: go ahead and check out the X rank hazard protection modules, as they are very unique, meaning that there's nothing else quite like them in the game. So what they do is that they give you percentage resistances to all 4 types of elemental weathers in the game, including toxic, superheated, cold, and radioactive. Now again, those stats are random, so it can be all the way to 10%. So the closer you are to 10% in each one of these, the better that is going to be. However, it's going to be absolutely worth it, because once you factor in their adjacency bonus, the multiplicative effects, and also the fact that you can supercharge them, you can gain so much resistance even to the most severe storm, so you can stay in it for way longer without having to consume any extra resources. So pay attention to these when you find them, either in space stations at the scrapper NPC, or when you go to any pirate system, or even when you get them from expeditions. Check out the ones that actually give you the biggest possible bonus stat range and have them in your inventory. They are going to be worth it. So you likely heard that grabbing a max rank freighter is one of the most endgame things you can do. Well, guess what? It's way easier to do now in 2024 and it's way less expensive than ever. It's pretty much absolutely free. Plus it gives you one of the coolest possible models, the Dreadnought. You can still use the old method if you prefer some of the other models, which I still recommend following anyway until you get at least a C rank. Reason being is because Dreadnought encounters only seem to spawn after you have already acquired your very first freighter. So from that point on, grab whichever you can, it doesn't really matter, and you're pretty much set for the farm. Even if it's a C class, you're going to quickly switch this up to a Dreadnought. Again, just like with the previous farms, I recommend doing a manual save with a save beacon before you start all of this process, just in case you want a point to go back to. And from this point on, we'll again use pirate systems and warp around until we find a freighter battle. Now for me, pirate battles actually started spawning in these systems after less than 2 hours from acquiring my first C rank normal freighter. So I will assume that the timer is maybe lower than that, maybe even only 1 hour. But once you spawn into one and you have the Dreadnought fight, you will just need to take down its engines and cannons before it surrenders to you. So immediately start with the backside and blast those engines off so that the Dreadnought doesn't try to escape, and from here on out destroy its 5 cannons. About 4 of them are in the back, easily accessible, and the final one is going to be in the front. And if you do this right, you'll get the captain to surrender just as you're about to approach the entrance once you destroyed the final 5th cannon. And from this point on, the only thing you need is to go inside, exit your ship, pull out your scanner, and see if your current Dreadnought freighter is at least an A class. If it's anything but, what you want to do is to immediately restore the last autosave. So if you restore the last autosave, this will actually put you right at the start of the battle before you took down the freighter, which is going to let you pretty much repeat that much faster and try your luck for a much better class. So you're going to have to do quite a lot of takes until you find a full-on max rank. I'm not going to lie, this is going to take a very long time. Maybe if you're lucky, it might only take like 20 or so tries, maybe even less. But if you don't want to waste any extra time and are sick of it, you can just settle down for an A rank, which should be just as good. Again, feel free to either use the autosave and try out in the same system, or the manual save from the save beacon if you want to try out in different systems. So for example, in this playthrough, I wasn't as lucky as I was in some of the others I had. And yeah, this is some of the old footage I have when I got a max rank Dreadnought just when it came out. So actually something that you really want to strive for if you do want the best in slot for everything. Now, in no particular order, there are a few more tips I want to talk about. They didn't have their own category, so I kind of condensed them all into one. One of them is that spaceports are extremely useful, specifically because there are 2 types of items that all of the NPCs landing here will sell you. One of them are some of these faction-specific relics that you can easily buy to farm reputation. Reputation is a lot more important nowadays. For some discounts we're going to check in just a bit, so it's always worth it to check these out. By the way, they also always sell agricultural substances like selenium, frost crystals, Fecium, and so on that you normally need to go to different planets to collect. So if you want to complete the agricultural base missions without having to waste much time, you can just land to one of these spaceports, buy all of these up, and quickly finish that part of the overseer mission. That's the way I did it because I just was too lazy to do it manually from each individual planet. Since you will need like thousands of them anyway, this is a much faster route. And then later on, once you do have the resources to set up different bases, you can think about planting them in your primary one. But until then, this can be a nice substitute. And since we talked about farming reputation, there's a good reason why you will want to farm reputation, not just with the different factions, but also with the different civilizations. So buy all of those relics like Viking daggers and Gek relics and Corvex casings from different systems, because you can easily give these to any space station NPCs and get that standing up with that specific race. This is going to instead also provide you with extra discounts when buying upgrades from space stations. Like as you can see, even a low enough grade is going to give you like 11% discount, which is really big. But this can go way higher than that. And trust me, it's going to matter as you progressively buy resources, especially the ones costing nanites. This can be a very good way to do so. But another thing to pay attention to that they did is that they reworked the guild envoys and rewards. And now they will actually get you a ton of cool items you can redeem even for free from every single envoy that you visit, but you will need to upgrade your reputation with them. So the fastest way is to donate the items that you see listed in the donate screen. In this case, there are a few that are very easy to pull off. For example, Hadal cores for the Explorers Guild can easily be bought from pirate systems. There are many of them, and each item that you give is going to give you 1 rank, so that can stack up quite fast. I found Mercenaries Guild to be the fastest because you can give in a ton of pirate transponders, so a lot of these actually drop from just, well, searching for freighters. You're going to fight a lot of pirates, so very easy to grab these, plus also from the main story. So all in all, this is going to eventually open up some extra rewards, and the best ones are going to be the inventory slot upgrades. This includes for your multi-tool, your ship, as well as your freighter. Each and every single one of the guild is going to give one for one of these specific tools. And once you hit that max rank, it's going to be amazing because now you can just hit new systems up and every single envoy is going to give you free rewards, or at least heavy discounts on existing ones. Totally worth it. Quick heads up, guilds are actually region specific, not system specific. So if you want to find a different sort of guild envoy, look for the current system that you're in and the region listed beneath it. So you're going to want to completely move away from that region into a completely different cluster of solar systems in the hopes that you're going to find a different guild over there. For example, I really wanted to get to the Mercenaries Guild envoy, however, that was in a different region, so I kept switching them until I actually reached one that featured it. And from that point on, every system within that region will actually have a guild envoy for that specific guild, so you can farm the resources and the rewards you need from them. I hope that explains it in case you got stuck not finding the Mercenaries Guild, as I do know many folks have trouble with that. By the way, quick tip for these missions and any missions that has a waypoint indicated, you never want to actually land straight on the waypoint, but instead, yeah, just look around for the main point of interest that the game is trying to bring you to. For some reason, ever since a few updates ago, the game actually puts you like 500 units away from the actual place you want to go to, because the game just wants you to use your scanners to reach it. So it's much better to just scout ahead before landing so that you go precisely to it and not waste that much time. Another tip for Traversal is whenever you encounter one of these planets with the large beetles, go ahead and make them your pets. They are absolutely amazing, especially on rough terrain planets, as they can gain a ton of altitude. So you can really fly high up, makes very easy traversal on these planets, and it's also really nice to look at as you don't have to consume any of your jetpacks. All you have to do is to craft some creature pallets, which only takes a few carbon, so you can just throw it at the ground, get the creature stable, interact with it, and then make it your pet. And from this point on, you can simply ride it wherever you want to. Also, as we talked about farming milestones just now, and also about like learning languages, the fastest is by just going to any space stations and asking the NPCs kindly to teach you their language. That's basically it. That's how I farmed about 150 plus words, plus you can gain 100 plus more from completing that Atlas path. By the way, quick tip, every now and then you might stumble upon planets, especially ones with severe storms, that might hold these large patches of resources, like big fields with sodium-rich plants or oxygen-rich plants, even ones with a ton of navigation data. Try to mark these down and remember them, as you can use them in the end game. You might stumble upon a few occasions when you actually miss, especially on the navigation data and charts, so this can actually be a very good source of that. But that, ladies and gents, concludes today's video. Yes, technically I know it's been a very long one, so massive thanks if you made it until the end. If you do, definitely leave a comment down below. And of course it was needed because the game has become absolutely massive and throws a ton of things at you. So many things, both old and new, had to be said for both the new and of course veteran players. But this is pretty much it. Let me know down below if you want me to continue the series. There are many even better advanced tips that have come out in the past few years, so I can definitely cover those too, plus some other interesting things that I have prepared along the way as well. So just leave your comment down below. And additionally, if you like this video, also subscribe and activate the notification bell. It would help me a ton. This video took a very long while for me to create. This is it. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time.